Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. Speaking to you today is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony L. Wolf, writer, narrative designer, and senior content manager in social media. I won't steal too much time from you before the beginning of this episode, but I want to say that today is a very special day. The day this episode goes live on the 4th of December, a very special event is taking place in the Indie Diarist Discord server. Like for the full week, it's going to be a holiday extravaganza. I'm going to hop onto the server every evening at 7 p.m. UK to play some multiplayer games with you guys for the full week from Monday to Sunday with some exceptions. And there are games like Play Top, Core Keeper, Tricky Tracks, and a lot of other games. I've partnered with the developers of these multiplayer games, which have been so kind as to offer me some keys for the event. So please go on to theindiediarist.com to find a link to the Discord server and join me for this beautiful holiday extravaganza. Let's have some fun together. I also, of course, want to shout out to my amazing Patreons who at the time of recording this are Feynoko, Zagini, Fishbump Dev, and Peleg. You guys are amazing, and I love having your support every single month. It really means a lot for me. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this episode with Tom Curtis tuning in straight from the US, Indie Diary number 29. Alright, hello everybody and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. Speaking to you today is, as usual, your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony L. Wolf. And with me today is another great guest from the indie game development community. His name is Tom, and actually, Tom, I'll just let you introduce yourself. Tell the listeners about yourself. Hey. What do you do? Where you're based? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. My name's Tom. I'm from Framingham, Mass. I've been doing game development for 2 years out of college now. And I work on HopDodge, which is a 3D indie platforming game. I hate that I put indie in the genre just now. But I think it's like quintessentially that's like one of the aspects about it that is really cool is that like I don't take inspiration from many like AAA level games, mainly just indie games and maybe some Nintendo, and I think that's just the thing I'm going for now with HopDodge is I want to try and get it to be more out there as like an indie game so that people can experience it because it's very community focused and that's why I have like this small community that I am trying to do a little bit of a secret puzzle with.
Okay. Well, we're going to have some chance to talk about HopDodge later on, but first, I always like to start from the beginning. But before I even do that, I have a little bit of an icebreaker for you, which is something that I like to ask to every guest that comes on the show. Now, this is going to put you on the spot a little bit, but if you could be any game's character for a day, who do you think you would be and why?
Oh, geez. I think Master Chief and Mario both come to mind.
Okay.
But if I had to really think about it, maybe like the SimCity player character, where you can just like edit the world. So
right, okay.
I could get.
So you want to be God, basically?
Yeah, I could dominate the real estate market and build a ton of good infrastructure, and then have like the perfect world to hang out in as a sim.
And probably do a better job than the infrastructure market. So, but anyway,
a lot of parks that'd be good. Because I wouldn't want to experience like the thing with like the other two is that they have like crazy movement. Like Master Chief jumps like 3 feet or 6 feet into the air with like slow gravity or whatever, and Mario does like kind of like that much, but instantaneously. Like he just jumps like his whole height. So like their movement options would be really cool and like fun to experience one day, but then it's gone the next. So like you get to experience that and then it goes away, it fades. But the SimCity thing like creates kind of like a permanent.
Like you leave something for others, I guess. Yeah. Leave something for the world.
And it like lasts your whole life theoretically in this scenario where I crafted where it lets you edit the world.
Then someone will come in and probably destroy what you made. But that's life, I guess. Yeah, no, but really interesting answers and good point there. Like you would be Master Chief for a day, you would have amazing skills, and then you would just miss them for the rest of your life. Whereas maybe the SimCity, you can leave something for others as a SimCity kind of manager and such. Okay, really like that. So, well, now that we've broken the ice, so to speak, as I mentioned, I like to start from the beginning with these ones. So think back to your childhood, and Mario probably comes to mind at this point because you mentioned it. What's your earliest or fondest gaming-related memory?
Oh wow. Okay, so my first console was a Game Boy Advance, classic purple. Um, I
Mm,
had Super Mario Advance, and I played that like every morning on the way to school for like 15 minutes
mhm,
and got through it. I was like into that my whole childhood. It took me like 3 or 4 years of 15-minute car rides, but I eventually did it. And that was because when I was home, I was like always trying to do different things. Like I had so many different like interests and activities that I would like pull. So like gaming wasn't really the focus. I mean,
mhm,
we had a GameCube later on, like when I turned like 6 or 7. We got a GameCube and Luigi's Mansion, and it gave me
mhm,
nightmares. So I didn't play much of it. I would play a little bit of Luigi's Mansion. And my dad got Star Wars, I think for himself because he really liked Star Wars, but he was
mhm,
terrible at video games and he kind of like got turned off of them when I was young, but I loved them. Me and my brother would like play them all the time. So we like he kind of got more into sports because he went to
mhm.
a school that focused on it a lot, and I got into games because uh, I was like good at school and didn't have to try much, so I could like come home, bust out the homework in a few minutes, and then like go play games. I mean, homework back then was like write a word 10 times.
Well, I guess at that point you were playing on a Game Boy Advance and all of that. So, do you think those games that you played back then are having or yeah are having an influence on the kind of work that you're doing now in terms of game development?
Yeah, definitely. Platformers were pretty big when I was a kid. They had like general dominance of the casual game market because they were kind of casual, but they were also like very generic. So like many people played them, and that led to them having the skills to play others. So like within the genre, there was a lot of content, but people were hungry for more. Now we're at the point where there's no hunger for platforming games, and
Hmm.
so you see a lot of games with platforming take kind of different directions in order to like stay fresh, because people don't want something that copies the best formula like flat out. Uh, I mean, that said, I like weird esoteric puzzles and like
Yeah, we'll
uh,
get to it pretty soon when we talk about HopDodge, I guess. Yeah.
like Luigi's Mansion is now one of my favorite games,
Mm,
and that was one of the like earlier games I played that wasn't just a platformer,
mm,
and I think that the reason for that is that Luigi's Mansion makes a lot of use out of the like interesting mechanics of its environments.
mhm.
It's
I
just
think you have
level
a point
design, you know.
there where you say that like people today are looking for something unique, like some interesting mashup of genres or something new and unexpected. And yeah, Luigi's mentioned back then. I haven't played it, but I've seen like, of course, other people playing it. Because I've most of my childhood was PlayStation, and then at some point more PlayStation, and then at some point some PC. So I kind of skipped the whole Nintendo era, and I'm kind of catching up now. But from what I've seen from Luigi's Mansion, yes, it was already kind of revolutionary at the time, and it kind of changed. It was something fresh compared to what had what had happened before and what people had been playing until that point. Um, so yeah, and well, at this point, I'm curious though. When did you realize that you wanted to do the switch from being a gamer to being a game developer? Like, was there some sort of aha moment? You mentioned that it's just like you've been
Well,
into it for the past 2 years or something, but
Yeah, I mean, technically I've been doing game dev for like 15 years. Cuz when I was like 11 and a half, I
Mm-hmm.
was playing on a DS doing Mario 64, the DS version, and I was thinking about how it worked because it was my first time playing a 3D game on a like handheld console. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess like something about playing in a handheld, you get a different feel for games than you do with a console. With a console, you're really enwrapped. With a
Mm-hmm.
handheld, it has to kind of fight for your attention, um, but it also doesn't. Like it's a distraction from the world when you're in like a waiting period. Like it it kind of like replaces patience because you can just sort of time travel with a game. So yeah, I was playing Mario 64, and my like little brain was like, how did they draw all these? Because I thought it was like a cartoon. I knew how cartoons worked, but I didn't know how games worked at all, and that bothered me. I was like, what what's going on? How do they make this? How do they like
Mm-hmm.
animate every different position of Mario? And so I asked my parents about it, and they were like, there's a game design thing at this annex that we can go to. And they took me, and I got to like sit in a room with a bunch of computers with Gamemaker installed, and that's all they had was
Ooh.
Gamemaker. It was like the teachers were just some like I don't know, probably computer teachers, but it was just doing tutorials, and
Mm-hmm.
we did some tutorials and we made some simple games, and it like really opened my eyes. Then that was an aha moment because knowing how games work now, the way I used to think games worked was funny to me. Like it's like an interesting thing, and figuring that out then was like really it like hurt my ego or whatever because I thought I was so dumb for the way I thought it worked, and I still didn't understand how the 3D ones worked. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, do they have like an object? How do how they make everything bigger and small? What? Because I
Yeah.
didn't understand that there's like a graphics thing for actually doing 3D with vertices. So I thought about it the wrong way for a long time. And then I started doing like computer science in high school because I was on a robotics team and taking AP computer science and like any computer science related electives there were, just because I wanted to learn more about it. Um, then I go to college and I want to like pursue a computer science degree. I just like I know a decent amount about computers now, but I still think that like I'm not fully aware of everything I need to know yet. Like the
Mm-hmm.
higher level math can kill you because like who wants to go and do a linear algebra in their free time? But like if you don't do it, you're gonna like fail when you try to write a shader or like
Yeah.
even just do simple geometry calculations to like having any sort of linear algebra in your head is going to make it so much easier, especially if you have
Yeah, of course.
physics. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
took physics. I'm just not like I'm not trying to say it's like impossible for me. It's just difficult, and it's
Mm-hmm.
probably impossible for some people. That said, that's why game design is awesome because when you're presented with an impossible problem and you are taught how to solve it, you get to see the solution play out. And if you don't understand the solution,
Mm-hmm.
you can like dig deeper so that you can generate those solutions yourself. And that's
Yeah.
that's where game design I think is useful because like I probably wouldn't have gone into computer science in general if I didn't use Gamemaker when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think that's it's always a magical moment when you for the first time realize how a 2D game works. And the fact that they are like sprites or just, pictures just like in movies, the frame by frame moving and alternating depending on commands and then listening for events and all of that. So it's always fascinating when you approach an engine for the first time and even just with first tutorials and such and then you get to see all the magic that's underneath the hood, and you start breaking down a game into its smaller parts. But as you mentioned, if you have a problem, then you find a creative solution for it, and you can see it play out before your eyes when you actually start playing with the engine yourself and such. So it becomes a very very fun and interesting and engaging process. And also, it does give you those dopamine hits because personally, I don't code much. I just do it as a hobby. I'm a writer by profession, so I just, as a hobby, I like learning to code here and there and just playing around with engines when I can. But that feeling of just seeing something work out and just seeing a problem being solved, and just having things work as intended, that's what keeps you going. And I think it is the same for a lot of people. So I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah. You mentioned it's a process. I think it's a scientific process
Mm,
because you have this code that you're writing that uh, gets checked for like errors at the like first step, and then the second step is you run it and check the behavior. And when you're
mhm,
checking the behavior of a program, realistically you can fully predict what it's going to do, but sometimes you can't.
mhm,
Sometimes it's just so hidden, like, oh well, you thought that this was going to print a number to the screen, but did you notice that there was actually a smaller type than the number? Since it was a char, it gets truncated, so it's just the
mhm.
last two, like, or last four bytes or bits.
There's a lot to learn, even just from experimenting and playing around with things and poking around in memory, um, as we like to do. But at this point, I'd like to ask you something a bit more in terms of like your experience coding. So, like, or in game development in general. So, like, is there a particular challenge, development challenge that has left a mark on you? Something traumatic that happened maybe at the beginning, and any big learnings that you may want to share with other
Trauma.
developers.
Okay. Well, in terms of trauma, um, nah, nothing too bad. I would say like the whole process, there was nothing that ever got me like upset that I didn't overcome. There's like some things that just fell by the wayside that I wish I did, but I just like I can sense how much of an issue they'd be. So like
Mhm,
rotating the grid in the editor is something I want to do. It's a complicated problem to fix. It's like there's not
mhm,
really raycast solutions built into Gamemaker. There's no like way to make it very simple to just have like a floating invisible plane and then use that as a raycast collider so that you can do like a rotate it and then have that be the plane that you're drawing on the objects. Uh, Although saying that now makes it seem a lot easier.
Basically, you're using me as a rubber duck right now. So, okay,
Well,
so I want to do
I've
that.
thought about this problem for a while, and I'm trying to give it as an example of like a problem that's too hard for me. Like I haven't approached it. I don't write the code
Mhm,
for anything until I like solve it. And
mhm,
I guess that's probably a good thing to say to developers. If you haven't solved anything, like, and you don't know how code works, there's two steps to solutions. There's one where you use somebody else's library, and solving it is figuring out how to use it correctly. Um, and there's the other, which is there is a solution. You just haven't thought about it enough. And then once you have it, it'll be like simple and bug free to program it. It's kind of it's a mess. There's a lot of stuff in computers that we like use as hacky solutions, but then there's also stuff that's like supposedly robust. And
mhm,
you might think a solution is robust, like, oh, all the cubes just draw themselves. No, that's not a solution. Doing voxels in general is difficult. Doing voxels from scratch in GameMaker is slightly easier than trying to just like import a voxel system and expect it to work the way you want it to. Because
mhm,
you might find that you want voxels that aren't blocks. You might want voxels that are enemies or like objects or like switches or like arrows. Just something to like break up the monotony uh, of like only voxels, but that's what happens when you use a library. You end up with a lot of
mhm.
voxels. I'm kind of losing the thread here. Point is,
Mhm,
the whole thing of programming is in a way traumatic. I think is the best answer to give because your brain starts solving problems like this, and you can't help but think about things in like this very analytical, like, okay, but this, then this, then this, then this, then that. Because that's how you program. You have to like think of ways to catch every case and then handle those cases by writing code that like exhibits that behavior. So at some level you're writing code to exhibit behaviors, but then at other levels you're like figuring out how to structure that, and then in even more levels you're like analyzing the overall thing to figure out like what sub elements that you're using to like fuel the whole thing aren't too much processing wise that you have to limit them in some way. And then other times you just have like you forget to write one statement and it's bad because it causes there to be a memory leak or something. So trauma all the way around with programming
Trauma is
is
part of development in general. Yeah, I
it
think.
changes who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. Speaking of trauma, I guess from an angle, I suppose, but like I think what I find interesting about HopDodge, and we've kind of discussed it before the call, is that I find it very original. I like the fact that I wasn't totally expecting the switch from 2D top down to 3D. Though I was, I noticed all the 3D items around me, all the 3D environment and such. And for more context for listeners out there, HopDodge is, and I'll leave the word to you.
Oh yeah, it's a top-down 3D platformer, but it's also a 3D platformer, and it's also a first-person 3D platformer.
Exactly. So HopDodge is a lot of things that really work together very well. What I'm curious to know from you, though, is I know that you recently delisted HopDodge from the Steam store. Now, if you're comfortable talking about the reasons behind why you did it and all of that, what was your original vision for HopDodge, and how has it evolved over time so much that it led you to actually delisting it for now, much to the sadness of a lot of people?
Well, I guess that originally my vision, like if we're going from way back, my vision was what it was, which was like a very limited 2D, 3D platforming app where you have this 2D editor and a 3D uh, world that you explore once the editor is popped out, and you're just like going on the layers. So you're like messing with the layers, and you're going up and you're going down, and you're like seeing the 3D effect in action, and it's like, whoa, it's not enough for a demo, but or like even anything interesting. But it was like this web app that I had up on my website. I didn't have any tracking metrics. I didn't know if I should like put it on itch or whatever. Um, and then I was like, this game's amazing. I love this. I'm gonna put it on Steam. Everyone's gonna love it. And I put it on Steam. I had no idea what I was gonna plan. I was like, do I do it free? Do I make it paid? Do I? And with like a month of putting it on Steam, I had like the workshop working. And once the workshop was working, I was like, well, that's it. That's everything it needs. It has everything it could need to be a game. Now, people can play the levels that I made, the little story, and then they can make levels, and it'll be popular because people will think it's so cool and neat and quirky. And it totally bombed because, of course, it did. Like it was a released early access like Gamemaker pet project that had existed for 3 months. Um, but I got a lot of feedback from the people who played it who liked it. They thought it was cool, and I implemented it. I was like, okay, camera control, got it. And I had never done camera control in 3D ever, so I was just writing trigonometry and like making things based off of what I saw in videos, and like uh, it took a lot of testing and like experimenting, but eventually I had it working with IJKL to control the camera. And uh, then later on, it was like the camera control sucks. You have to rework it. So I reworked it again and again and again, and then eventually it got refined to where it is now, which hopefully doesn't feel too bad. It's like the scroll to zoom and the click to move the
Hmm.
camera, or the click to toggle the camera on the
It's
dog.
pretty intuitive, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's very it's very much like, because I had the game released and there were people who paid for it and were playing it, that those issues got fixed. And
Hmm.
they were like complaining like this should have been fixed from the beginning, and they were like, right. So eventually those issues got ironed out, and then it was like a month or two after release, and my entire vision for the game changed. I wanted it to be much more robust, way more complete, lots more levels, a lot more mechanics. So I built a bunch of new mechanics and stuffed them into a second story that had like all these new things like crates and moving crates on platforms, and having the
Hmm.
crates interact with like multiple rabbits, and the dodge platforms on top of the crates. You can't move them, so he has to have Hop move them. And uh, then I wanted to go even further. I added new enemies, and that became story 3 with like goblins and bees and ghosts. And then I like ended up sprinkling them back through the levels so that the older levels felt more updated, and then a lot of levels got reworked, and it became a background thing. I was like, oh, this background thing will add a lot. Oh, this thing will add a lot. And then it just became like all these little things that added a lot.
Yeah.
The signs
Yeah, they
had
kind of added
custom
up. Yeah.
text. They had custom sprites. I added multiplayer at one point, and then like it ended up being broken for a while, and then I fixed it, and then I fixed it again, and then I updated it,
Mm.
and it broke again, so I had to fix it again. And uh, then it was like almost a full year since I had started working on it, and I had this idea in my head for something that would really change the entire paradigm of the game. I wanted to
Hmm.
make blocks that you could write custom scripts in that, when activated, would execute a custom script and then have any type of behavior you could program happen in the game. That was like
Oh,
this
there are some games that do that. Space Engineers, for example, has custom scripts, custom blocks, and that, and I always find them very interesting because you can do a lot of great things. Yeah,
Little Big Planet. They all have
Little Big
their own.
Planet. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, Little Big Planet too.
the idea of having like codable blocks, it's kind of Minecraft-esque. I think I'd never really experimented with command blocks much. I stopped really playing Minecraft in like 2015, probably the last time I really like played it seriously. I mean, I've jumped
Yeah,
into a
same
couple of
here. I mean,
worlds, but like,
yeah.
um, yeah, the command blocks in Minecraft must have been like a genius idea, but they still don't get utilized at the full capabilities that they have. And I thought I'll just do that, but with Gamemaker script. So I found this thing that was like a debug tool for uh, developers on the marketplace that was like a string parser that could take in a string and then execute code based on that string. And it could do a lot. It had if-else statements, it had loops, it could handle like math and like simple functions. But it was still limited by, it didn't know every single game maker function. But yeah, like it was working. And then soon after that, I also had like the 3D particle system, which is like how the level previews get made. So I used that I made a level that looked like a car, and then
Okay.
I made a level that had like a road with like blocks
Mhm.
surrounding it, and it was like a little Mario Kart track, like very small. Um, and I took the object, I linked it to a rabbit that had the camera, and then I drove the car by like moving it forward with
Mhm.
like W, and then slowing it down with S. So speed up and slow down, and then turning the directions. It's like this little micro script for just like one object to
Mhm.
exist in the world and have its step data. And so I did that. I did Flappy Bird. I did Doodle Jump. I made like a Break the Targets clone where I gave one of the characters like a double jump. I was like playing around with this code block, and I saw that the possibilities were endless.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Like basically on a smaller scale, you made some sort of like games editor in the way of Dreams or Little Big Planet, indeed. So you could technically make anything in there.
yeah, I thought that that was going to be a moment when the game would like blow up, right? But no. I added shadows at one
Still
point,
didn't. Okay.
and the game looked kind of better, but only really where the shadows were seen.
Hmm.
Uh yeah, so I like started working on trying to add more graphical features. So I talked to this guy on Twitter. His name is Zor, XOR, and he makes amazing game maker shaders. And I had seen his stuff on Twitter, and I was like, hey, if I wanted to have like a meeting with you, like, and pay you for consulting and helping me with this game, would you be down? And he was like, yeah. So we did that for uh like an hour a week for a couple of months, and we got like ambient occlusion, or sorry, we got normal mapping, we got like different lighting fixes, the water shader, um, rain. There's rain in the game that's very
Hmm.
hidden. No one knows about it. It exists, but it's like no one's gonna know how to spawn the rain. And there's like a lot. It's very cool uh how much progress I was able to make like visually thanks to his help. Um and that was when I was like, okay, now with all these visual flares, it's probably ready. And it still wasn't ready. I released it and nobody cared, and like it didn't get like uh any sales. I made a new trailer. The trailer was bad
Hmm.
apparently. I lamented about it on Reddit. It got a lot of attention. People were like, you shouldn't expect anything." It's like, okay, fair enough. You know what? Fair enough. HopDodge does not need to expect anything. Not yet, because like games take a long time. Every
Hmm.
game, every successful indie game I've seen, that's like successful because it's a take on an old genre done very well for an indie game. Uh, they take like 5 years.
Hmm. They take a lot of time. Yeah. Nowadays, creating any game takes a very long time, especially a multi-million dollar budget, but especially for indie games, for indie developers as well, who are like alone and probably still learning the ropes by themselves. So I see exactly what you mean. But also, I think there's the problem of discoverability right now, which is something that I always talk about on the show with this or that guest, or sometimes I even at one point I did a collab with Still Loading podcast, and we did an entire episode about the rise of indies and the new wave of indies from from the early noughties and such. And the problem of discoverability is very much a thing. Like there's thousands. I don't remember how many thousand. I think it's 12,000 titles released on Steam each year, of which like 5,000 are indie alone. Um, Probably something like that. So finding a game, or for people to actually find your game, it becomes pretty tricky. So sometimes just releasing doesn't really do the trick, no
Yeah.
matter how good your game is. And in your case, I from the little that I played it, I enjoyed it. I think there is a lot of great stuff in there. There's definitely a lot of potential. There's definitely a lot of people who will love this game once you feel like it is complete and it's got all the features that you want it to have.
Yeah. I have like an inverse of what you need though. Like what you need to make a successful game is you have to have something that looks awesome, looks so cool, looks great, and then a game that's like good enough. That's a great way to get a lot of sales. I went for like a store page and a front end that looks good enough, and a game that I think is great. And that
Yeah, I see. I see why that would be a problem. Yeah, it's mostly
yeah,
because it's that first impact is what matters. So you want to capture that attention right away. But yeah, I think in that case, I would say, what is it that you learned from the development of HopDodge so far, and how where is that going to take you going forward?
uh I don't know. I've been kind of working on these other projects, and I I'm working on a game jam right now for a game called Combined Arms. It's like a 2 week
Mhm.
slow jam for the Indie Seattle server on Discord. And the the feeling I get is that I'm very much like not practicing the right practices as a developer by working
Mhm.
on HopDodge. And not only that, I think HopDodge is like slightly cursed. Like it has a like easily cursed energy. So like maybe it's just, yeah, sometimes you have to walk away from a project that you had a lot pinned on. Like you put a lot of hope and
Mhm.
effort into something, and it didn't pan out because like it just it's not as good as it could have been with the right
Mhm.
like time entrance. Like if I had started working on it for 5 years from now, would it have been successful? Who knows? But it might have
Mhm.
been like a harder, even harder discoverability, like you said. So it was better that I
Yeah.
tried now and failed,
Mhm.
and then got the awareness that a lot of games fail. A lot of games are hard to make, and making something that's successful takes a lot of experience and time and energy. And you also have to focus on things that you might not feel like as a developer are your priorities.
Mhm. Yeah.
So marketing is the hardest part of any indie
Yeah.
game. That's what they
It
say.
is.
I'm bad at marketing. I think that I don't even know. I'm just like, because I'm a developer, I'm shut in, right? Like most developers
Hmm.
are. You can try and be a cool guy, right? Like people
Yeah,
will be
but
like, "Oh, I like this guy. He says what I want to hear." It's you know, but people will just
it's
see
tricky.
that
Yeah.
and they'll say, uh, "You're not as good at that than guy who doesn't do any development and focuses on that full time. The full
Mm.
time cool guy is going to always be
Full
cooler
time
than
cool.
you." So trying to do cool when you're a developer, it like backfires in a way.
Hmm.
So like go on Twitter and post a progress post every time you write a single line of code.
Mm.
Go and like post and post and post, because like at least if you have numbers on your side, you have something like that can help, you know?
Hmm.
Having numbers is really important. Like even just saying like the amount of time you worked on something. If you've worked on something a long time and you haven't done any marketing, and then suddenly like you're like listening to this podcast and you're hearing another developer who by all accounts has the coolest game in the world, but is just not noticed because his marketing sucks.
Hmm.
Like do the opposite of what I do. Be desperate. Go and make your posts all the time. Go on every thing, and uh, at the very least, you'll get into the practice of posting to the point where your posts get better. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
I think it's good to be desperate for whatever you want, because like for example, I was desperate for a game because I wanted to feel good about myself as somebody who's like not not going great in the field I'm going in, right? Like
Hmm.
I was having trouble getting a job 2 years ago, and like kind of back in the same boat. It's just it's difficult to make money on game dev. So if you need money to live, don't do game dev. Um,
Yeah, despite what some people might tell you that
yeah,
become a millionaire. Well, maybe you can, but like it does take a lot of different skills and a bit of luck and all of that stuff. It's just not really that easy. And I see exactly what you say here, Tom. And also, listeners, if you're entering this podcast from this episode, or if you've just missed the footnote number 2 for some reason, or was it number 3? Number 3. Footnote number 3, which is my marketing special with 3 people from the marketing space. Just go and listen to that one, because I think a lot of indie developers are in the same situation as what Tom is describing here. And that episode will hopefully give you some advice, or at least give you a steer towards where you need to go to do a little bit of marketing. And as my guest said back then, it's never too early to start. Be desperate, because because yeah, it's never too early to start marketing. You need an audience to create an audience, I suppose, and to make a game. Um,
yeah.
but we've been getting very.
That episode has a lot of good advice.
Oh well, oh, you've listened to that. Yeah, well, thank you. Well, you've got Tom's endorsement here, so that's good. So you've seen that we've progressively been going deeper and deeper into the pros and cons of being a game developer and such. And here's a question that I like to ask to every single guest who comes on the show. And we're near the end, so this is going to be a very deep one. Why are you a game developer? What is it that drives you forward? What is it makes you,
Sunk
why do
cost
you keep
fallacy.
going?
No, I love games. I do. I really enjoy when there's like a moment where I see somebody interacting with something I created and they enjoy it. That feels great. It's actually it's very rewarding. But at the same time, keep in mind you could probably do that like a million, like if you're after that feeling, you could become a doctor and like you could get that feeling every day and make way more money than everybody else. So it's just like I'm saying this because it is exponentially harder than it has ever been. So there's probably a lot of game devs who listen to this podcast. uh
Hmm.
I'm just like I'm trying to get people to be a little bit more realistic than me,
Hmm.
because I'm I'm unrealistic. Like I focus on this because it's just sort of a habit. I do it because I I enjoy just like the 5 or 6 people that I hear from who play the things I make, and that's enough for me. And then like also I'm trying to get out of this field. Like I've been like looking for jobs for a while. It's tough for me because I don't have uh, any experience yet, and it's kind of late, you know. The only project I have is this, so at least I can point to it and be like, I did this for a while, and they'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, oh, and I can be like, have you seen my demos? Like, my
Well, I
demo's
guess what
going
you're saying
off.
here then. Well, I guess what you're seeing, what you're saying here then is to do it for the money. I mean,
Don't do it for the money, no.
if you do want to do it for, that feeling of having people play your stuff and just something that you created, and you also have fun creating that kind of stuff that people want to play, then that should be your driving force. Don't do it for the money because you're going to burn out and possibly not make a lot. So yeah, that's passion before money, I suppose. Um, but
Well,
yeah, so I
also,
guess.
if you do it and you don't want to burn out, pretend you're doing it for the money. Like, it, it
Yeah.
it's a paradox because like don't get into it, but if you are into it, don't give up on the dream because you heard somebody say that it's not profitable. You should, as a developer, drive yourselves towards at least like figuring out how to get the profit. That's
Mhm,
like it's it sounds paradoxical, but like if you don't make that your hill of like skill, then you're not going to gain the skills at the very least if you want to like transfer out. Like what if you wanted to do like a dating app, right? If you have a dating app and you came from games and you like couldn't get people to play your free game, now you have a free dating app. It's like maybe you even have users now. How do you get enough users that it's going to be scaled and it's going to get enough users that they can
mhm,
meet each other or whatever? Like it's more difficult outside of games sometimes for those reasons, but usually you're working with a like company that is hiring a team of developers to create something for them, and that's like ideal. So again, if you're in games and you want to sell your game, like don't be like, I should just make it free because there's so many games out there. Do it. You're going to learn and get skills, and maybe you'll like surprise like the chance, you know. I don't know. I
mhm,
think it's a weird paradox, I know. But don't get burned
mhm,
out because it's not making as much. Get hyped up because there's so much room for improvement.
mhm.
I
I
don't know.
like that. Okay, perfect. And of course, from someone who's been there, apparently, at least from the words that I've heard over the course of this conversation, um, I suppose sometimes you do feel lonely or discouraged as an indie game developer. How do you cope with that?
Go join discords and talk to other developers. You will hear what I'm saying probably a lot as well, but you'll also get 100 different perspectives. Um, yeah, sometimes it's a little quiet in those places, like people are just sitting there working. But if you have a question, like, and you go in and you're like, how do I get a character to jump? There's gonna be somebody who will be like, I'll show you. Like, you'll you'll get free tips and tricks for all the basics because that's what game developers can do in like minutes. And you'll also get the perspective of other developers. They won't buy your game, so don't market to them. But like,
Yeah. Don't market to other game developers. Yeah,
I mean, I buy
that's a
I buy
problem on a lot
other
of
indie
platforms too.
games, but like
I do, yeah,
I
as
do it
well,
when I
yeah.
meet
But
them in servers and stuff, and I think their game looks
mhm,
cool. I met this one, yeah, I met this one guy in a Discord. He had a game that he'd worked on for 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, and it was amazing. The end is Nwahal. It's Nahual, uh, if I may say so, is the whole name. And it's a point and click adventure game with like a lot of really good graphics. Story is translated from Spanish, so it's got kind of a like there's some things about it that might be hard to understand, but like it overall has like a very cool aesthetic and like it's amazing, and uh it should be more popular. So I like picked that one up because I saw it and I was
Mhm.
like, I care about the development time, contrary to what Reddit says. Like, if somebody comes to me and they're like, I have a game that I worked on for 10 years, I'm like, all right, well, I will try it then. Like,
Yeah, that's commitment. Yeah, and
yeah,
it must mean something. Yeah. Well, connect with other people. Definitely, it's some solid advice. And now that we're in a very much near the end, a little bit of a fun question to wrap things up. If you had unlimited budget and time, what game would you create?
Um, Ooh, I had an idea for a game where you start in like a white void, and as you look around, it procedurally generates mechanics and worlds,
Ooh.
and like and everything. Like it just like continuously procedurally generates things, and permutes it such that when you look around, it like changes and has like a pinhole of like a world. But then as you move forward, it like becomes more concrete, and the like basic proceduralness of like the world existence is sort of like solved by it, and then it's able to like do individual things within that world, so you can like just move in any direction and explore, and then like experience like anything basically, just based off of tons and tons and tons of procedural generation. And nothing really exists until you experience it, though, because you have to like move forward in order for the world to continually craft to like the more detailed aspects of the scenario. So I think that'd be cool. I think it would probably it would probably be like a fun thing to try, but it could also potentially be dangerous. Like it would just never end. So you would like you could have every game in it. Like you could go down one path long enough and then end up in like Pokemon or something.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. that would definitely be interesting. Well, okay. And actually, it is a really great idea, I think. But yes, indeed, unlimited budget and time.
Very unfeasible.
Unfeasible.
Waiting for that quantum console,
exactly.
The PS7.
Yeah, a bit of quantum theory there, just in the console of that game. But anyway, right. So Tom, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and it's been a lovely chat.
Likewise.
I think we've touched on some interesting points here, and yeah, I'm sure other people will enjoy this episode very much. So to wrap things up, where can other people find you, and if they do, what is the best way to support you right now?
I'm on Twitter. My handle's blank, but the @ is HopDodge.
Mm-hmm.
So people can find me there. I post a lot of stuff. My timeline's an interesting read. I'll say that. But
okay.
Yeah. I'm also on Steam. The game's there. You can probably still wishlist it. I can't imagine they disabled it, but like, yeah, you can't buy it anymore. Sadly. No worries though. It'll be better when you do get the chance to buy it. And then you'll want to buy it. You will want to buy it. You will want to buy it.
A little bit of conditioning there. Okay. Well, perfect. Well, thank you, Tom. Of course, I will put all of these links in the description. And again, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. Wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, wishing you the best of luck with HopDodge, and if not HopDodge, anything that comes after it. And also with your job hunt, which sounds like you're in the middle of.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, listeners, for listening.
And that, my friends, is a wrap on another episode of the Indie Diaries podcast, the next to last, before the end of the year, before the end of season 1 of the show. So I've got something really special planned for the new year, for the first anniversary of the show. You'll just see it. It'll be something that will blow your minds. Well, not quite, but hopefully something that you'll still enjoy. But thank you, Tom, for being such an amazing guest. It was lovely having you on the show. We talked about a lot of things, and it was a very nice trip down HopDodge's memory lane, so to speak. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show, rate it 5 stars, because that helps me a lot, and follow me on social media. You can find a lot of links on theindiediaries.com. You can also find links to support me on Patreon, Coffee, or whatever else. But yeah, following me on Twitter or joining my Discord is obviously the best way. And lastly, if you are an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch, because I would love to tell your story to the world, just like I did with Tom here. I'll speak to you next time.